Assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allah says in Surah Al-Hadid, Allah says in Surah Al-Hadid, ثم قفينا على آثارهم ثم قفينا على آثارهم برسلنا وقفينا بعيسى بن مريم وآتيناه الإنجيل, that he sent after the messengers Ibrahim and Nuh and Ibrahim, he sent Isa ibn Maryam. وآتيناه الإنجيل, and gave him the Injil. وآتيناه الإنجيل وجعلنا في قلوب الذين اتبعوه رأفة ورحمة, and he put in the hearts of those people who followed Isa, the son of Maryam alayhi salam, put in their hearts رأفة ورحمة, that they had rahmah and a softness in their hearts and a zeal for the religion. وَرَحْبَانِيَّةً ابْتَدَعُوهَا مَا كَتَبْنَاهَا عَلَيْهِمْ. But وَرَحْبَانِيَّة, monasticism. Okay, so this tradition from Christianity, monasticism, is something Allah says that they innovated. وَرَحْبَانِيَّةً ابْتَدَعُوهَا, they innovated that, they made that up. They added that to their religion. Allah says this in Surah Al-Hadid. Okay? وَرَحْبَانِيَّةً ابْتَدَعُوهَا مَا كَتَبْنَاهَا عَلَيْهِمْ إِلَّا ابْتِغَاءَ رِضْوَانِ اللَّهِ فَمَا رَعَوْهَا حَقَّ رِعَايَتِهَا. That he did not prescribe that for them. They added something to the religion, and he did not prescribe it for them, but they were only supposed to strive for the pleasure and the pleasure of Allah, to try to please Allah. But they didn't, but they didn't even do that truthfully and in truth. Because if they truly were doing it for the pleasure of Allah, they would have followed exactly what Allah and the Messenger Isa ibn Maryam had the path that he had laid them upon. So what does Allah say? فَآتَيْنَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْهُمْ أَجْرَهُمْ. The people who believed, and to believe is what? You believe in Allah and what he revealed, you act upon that by following the messenger. So those people who actually followed Isa ibn Maryam and did what he did and followed that instead of what they innovated, as Allah said, this is not just a Wahhabi thing and they, or whatever, but Allah says they innovated that in their religion. The monasticism, this extraordinary, the celibacy, they don't marry, and some of these other things that they added to the religion that was not part of it. Anyway, so Allah says, فَآتَيْنَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْهُمْ أَجْرَهُمْ. The people who believed, they followed the messenger, they followed what Allah said and didn't make stuff up, added things in. فَآتَيْنَاهُمْ فَآتَيْنَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْهُمْ أَجْرَهُمْ. He gave them their reward. وَكَثِيرٌ مِنْهُمْ فَاسِقُونَ. But most of them were defiantly disobedient. They were lawbreakers. They were people who did not do the right thing. They were fasiqun. So for us, we have to understand Allah is giving us the examples of what the people did before us. Here we are, fast forward. We have the messenger, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Quran. And we have people still today, after Allah gives us the examples, the messenger says don't do it, that are adding things to the religion and saying, if you guys want to follow the Sharia, go ahead. But I have something extra and something better. Please look into Surah Al-Hadid. It's in the last page of Surah Al-Hadid, and you will find this ayah there. Look into the tafsir, and perhaps it will help those people who feel like that the Sharia is not enough. They need something extra. This is a warning for them. But Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, we have a good show. for you today, inshallah. May Allah accept our efforts. I will let our brother Ja'far take it from here. Go ahead, brother.
All right. So, alhamdulillah, shukran for joining us again for another installment of the R2F show. We have a special guest with us, one of the, I would say, OG members of R2F, one of the, I guess, one of the founding sisters of R2F. Alhamdulillah. So, but real quick, before we get to our interview, we just want to mention Imam Asim from a brother from Philadelphia has passed away. We would just like to take a moment of silence or making dua for him. May Allah bless him. May Allah forgive him. Of course, whenever any of we face some types of hardships like this, we say Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un. And may Allah bless him, forgive him for his sins and his transgressions, and grant him Jannatul Firdaus. Ameen.
Ameen.
So with that, so we don't waste any more time, we are going to welcome the Empress, the Persian Empress, Scheherazade. Welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum. Okay. Can you all hear me well?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Alhamdulillah. Okay. Okay. Well, do I get started?
Well, let's just start off. We'll start you off with just tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe like your history of being Muslim, and like where you kind of started off in your life as being Muslim.
Okay.
Just start from the beginning. We
will. I shall. Okay. Okay. My name is Scheherazade. I was born into the Dar Islam movement of Brooklyn, New York. My father converted to Islam, I believe, around the mid-60s. Then he would give my shahada, and he would bring her into Islam, and they would get married, and they would have their first son, and I would be their second child, born in the 70s. And I would have a sister that followed that. And pretty much, life there would be pretty much described as school. We would start that off for sure. And 4 days of school, Monday to Thursday, Friday Juma, Saturday Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, Sunday be like, the parents, the elders, they would have classes, and the brothers would like do rod training. That would be kind of what it would look like, basically.
Okay.
And and how the school started was it started at masjid, like when we were very small, and they taught you your Arabic alphabet, everything. It starts small first, just at masjid. But as time goes on, the community grows quite large. So, it would go to a larger building pretty much. And it started off with little vans. And then as the community grew, they bought their first yellow school bus. And then they bought the secondary yellow school bus. So they would have a girl school bus and a boy school bus. And pretty much we bought it actually on the block, street of which I actually lived on. And so, we had school. Go ahead,
Real quick, just so is this community right now, or they're referring to, you're talking about like the Dar al-Islam, are we talking about the Dar al-Islam community, or is this before the Dar al-Islam community?
This is the Dar al-Islam community.
Okay.
Yeah, they were already developing it, and this would be like the East New York area.
Okay.
So it seems to me that it's very clear for those people who are listening or hating or just in general. It seems to me that the experience that you have explained so far seems to be like a functioning running community.
Correct.
Not necessarily just a big pot of confusion and people who can't don't know their can't get their way out of a wet paper bag, as they say. But I mean, it seems like there's some function there. there's a community there, there's some direction there, that should be acknowledged. I think that I try to hit that home every time that it's mentioned, just because of how much is driven into the younger generation's heads, that anything before TMOA was just like, I don't know, like they say the cavemen or whatever, that they didn't even know what fire was and stuff like that. So anyway, go ahead.
Right. Okay, so that would be basically how we would live. And our elders, our and abus, they had businesses. And the ladies, they sewed, so they would sell the items. They baked, but it was very, very structured. Very structured. You never missed a day of school, or you were in trouble. But we were taught, like, from very young ages, all of our surahs. By the time we were 7, we knew all of our surahs and our complete prayer. And so much so that you would actually be in trouble for not knowing your surahs. They had you prepared before, by the age of 7, pretty much.
Wow.
And
real quick. So, like, do you remember your teachers from back then?
Oh yes, I do.
Were your teachers like Pakistani immigrants or Arab immigrants, or were they African Americans?
African American.
Oh, okay.
All African American.
So essentially, in the Dar al-Islam movement, you had African Americans who knew their Islam and were actually teaching their Islam and propagating their Islam, so much so that, like, you very quickly went from a small little school to needing 1 school bus to needing 2 school buses. So not only was it just a functioning Islamic community, it was actually one that was growing and thriving, and that it seemed to have capable teachers and people of knowledge in it.
Yes, it was very much so. Alhamdulillah. Okay. And they had, now the actual neighborhood of which we lived in was, like, I would say approximately 3 combined streets, and they all had Muslims in it. Now, the buildings themselves were buildings that were connected. This is, in the city of New York. And they had rooftops, basements, alleyways, and courtyards. And all of these combined actually connected the buildings, and you can go through. Now, of course, people of sinister nature usually lingered in these areas. So you could play outside, but you had, the Ummis, they had monitors. You had to get your little note. Your or your Abu had to sign that. You go out to the monitor and she would sign it. Oh, now, wow. we did slip away a few times because they were so interconnected, and there was windows everywhere. And they had these Venetian blinds. So when we did slip out and going through these courtyards, if they even heard these little teeny voices, you would see that Venetian blind would start opening up. You see that beard and you see that thobe. That means get up and out of it. Or you see the kimar, because we call it kimar then. The kimar, and that Ummi with that baby, that means get out of there. And they would even do their heads going, no. And we did slip away a few times. And what we would do, we would go through the courtyards, go through another one and into the building. And some of the most adventurous kids, they would go to the rooftop and they called it jumping the roof. And of course, I had to be part of that crew. Yeah, I had to be part of that crew. And we would jump the roofs, come back through a building, come back through the next building because it's interconnected. And then we would come back into the courtyards to the park and actually pretend that we had been there the whole time. So it was, pretty much children play.
Nice.
And
so at some point, like at what point did you notice anything when you're growing up, things start to change within the community, or?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Talk about that a little bit.
Okay. And we're getting ready to get into that. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, you're fine. So at some time, I would say 6th grade, could have been around 6th grade, I start noticing a little bit subtle changes in the community. It just was subtle. The trash was one. The trash was accumulating And you start noticing it's actually your neighbors' things at this time. It's like, But our house was pretty much just the same. But then it would be our turn. Things started like, my mother started, things, we see our trash out. And what was going on at the time, which I would later understand, is that they were getting rid of their material possessions.
Oh, wow.
They're getting rid of so much so that it was the word on the street, and that it was like maybe 3 blocks of what we call streets. Down, there were projects, and these projects were like probably 13 stories high. And they would drive up and start loading their vehicles. But I really didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was going on at this time. And I would later find out that, that the families had joined what we had called back then the Fukra Jamaat, which would be, TMOA.
The Jamaat of the poor.
Right.
Real quick, I just want to, and I'm not going to go on too much of a tangent. So,
no, go ahead. Oh, please.
It's always interesting when we sit back and we like, none of it, for anybody knows, none of this is scripted. We don't really like, we kind of like have a little basic plan, but just notice how Mubarak he did a whole 5-minute talk about how the Christians just like, they monasticized themselves, they innovated to the religion, get rid of your worldly possessions. And you're just telling your story and you're telling something that directly relates to what he just talked about. About like, get rid of all your, because when you're talking about it, it reminds me of like when Allah sent the command to like no more alcohol, and then all the Muslims, like it was like the streets were flowing with alcohol because all the Muslims just got rid of it because it was actually haram. But then Fukra comes, or Sheikh Jelani comes, and like, get rid of all your halal possessions, and everybody just starts dumping them on the streets. It's crazy.
Right.
So
And
was it a thing?
Go ahead, please.
So was it a thing where and I'm sorry if I jumped the gun a little bit, maybe you're gonna say this, but was it a thing where they were like, was it like a mandate, or like were people just like in that spirit of, okay, well, this person got rid of their TV, well, I'm getting rid of my TV and computer, or people just try to one up one another, and everybody just starts trying to be the best
unfortunately, unfortunately, I was too young for the politics at this time, but later it would be explained to me because I actually would ask my mother. And then it would be a series. And I mean, it would be like every 7 trash cans, televisions. So the projects, they will come down and start lifting televisions. So one day, actually, we come home, and actually at this time, we have dolls and things. All of the dolls are gone. All of the dolls, all the stuffed animals, anything with a picture. My little sister's entire library is gone, and like certain other little items in the home. And this is when my mother explains to us that, that these things are worldly possessions. And then we get into the conversation that would become very interesting shortly after this. And this is what the first time I actually hear of the Afghan campaign. So my mother sits us children down, and she explains to us, your father and I have signed up for the Afghan campaign. And she said that she basically told us that we would be assigned to different families. Like, you go here, you go here. And if something happened to her, that these families would take care of it, in which we knew the families, I think we were divided to like about 5 families.
Wow.
She explained it Shaheed, which I understood. She explained it Shaheedain. I understood that because I learned that at home and at school. That was perfectly clear to me. And actually what she was saying did not disturb me or bother me because, you're dying in the way of Allah.
Right.
That was not a problem. And the families that actually she had assigned to us, or she, actually accepted her, requesting that they take her children. There were actually families that we were close to because we only had limited families that we could visit their home anyway. My mother didn't allow us to visit any homes that went against her teachings and how she raised her children.
Right.
Okay,
real quick.
Go ahead, please.
So, and you may not know this, but like, what was when you say your mother signed up for that, like,
Correct.
What does that mean? That she was going to go fight like in jihad?
Yeah,
as a
yes,
woman?
in the way of Allah.
Oh, wow.
Right. So, and this conversation is crystal clear.
Wow.
So
But
your mother and father were going to go together and engage in jihad in Afghanistan in this jihad campain.
And she explained that to us. Yes.
Wow. That's
And
the first time I've heard like that the ladies were actually signing up to go. That's amazing. I mean, I remember
even so much so that other children, I guess the family said no. They even knew that if that we were going to be staying with them in an event that anything happens to our parents, that their parents would raise us. But
I got to throw this in real quick just before I forget. But it's interesting that because we know this is coming from Mubarak Jilani, who's recruiting all these people to go fight jihad, and I wonder if he recruited any of his wives or sisters or daughters to go fight in jihad with him.
I would have no idea.
I'm pretty sure the answer to that is no, absolutely not. But you can come to America and grab some African Americans up and have them abandon their kids and have women come and supposedly fight in your cause overseas. Absolutely ridiculous. But go ahead. Sorry, I just had to throw that in.
To be clear, this jihad campaign, and even women joining the campaign and fighting was something implemented and basically directed and run by Mubarak Jilani, right?
Correct.
Okay, just that I know we know that, but it's just to be clear so that nothing is twisted and turned around by people who might listen afterwards or whatever. People always find a way to say, well, no, this was something that was at the direction of Jilani. Okay, so I'm sorry, go ahead and continue.
Okay, and pretty much from there on, we didn't really hear Sheikh Jilani. We would hear actually Sheikh Jilani in school and on the school bus, but never really too much in the home. And that would change one day. My mother's playing a cassette in the kitchen, and this man is talking, and it's not one legible word coming from his mouth. So I look in the kitchen and I was like, oh, well, who's that? And she turns with a big smile and she says, that is Sheikh Jilani. But she goes about, the kitchen and her affairs. And pretty much from there, it goes to, this is moving fast. She sits us down again and she explains to us that we will be making hijrah. And we would be blessed to be one of the first families. And again, I understood hijrah because they taught us in school from Mecca, the hijrah from Mecca to Medina. And I also understood muhajirin. And this was the words that she used, muhajirin. But it's still something new. And my mother doesn't go into too much into it. But I don't know how they had it planned, whatever, but my family decides to make the hijrah a little earlier than they had planned.
Okay.
And we kind of, from there, it was just moving pretty fast because remember, also I'm still very young.
Right. So you went from going from finding out that your mother and father were potentially going to go be Shahid and jihad in Afghanistan, and that you're going to have to be raised by some family friends, to then now you're traveling and making hijrah to California.
Yeah.
Correct. California.
Okay.
And the only thing at that time we knew about California was sunny California. So it sounded exciting. And it wasn't like an isolated feeling, because when we made the hijrah, which we drove, we actually went in a 5-family caravan with other families that would join what we say the Fuqra Jamaat. Okay, so some of them were a little bit prepared. You can tell because they had the U-Hauls and and other trucks. And our family was a large family, and we was just pretty much sardined into our station wagon. Right? Wow. So I was like, okay, we're looking around, and you can tell the other families were totally prepared.
Right.
So, so the day comes that we're going to make the hijrah. But our neighbors who had not joined, the Fuqar Jamaat at this time, that's what it was called. They came out and they were pleading for us not to leave. They were giving us, the parents' numbers, and kind of went on for a little while. And it kind of actually gets a little late, and actually we had to go in for Maghrib prayer. But when we come back out and we're trying to leave, actually, like, it was like a swarm, like, of Muslim brothers now. And they're actually really upset. But, now we're back in the car, the station wagon, so I can't really hear the words. But they settled that difference pretty much. And one of the brothers, he owned actually a little market right on, because it was corner stores just about everywhere. But he had his little market. So he just comes away from it. He goes and gets some he actually unlocks his store. He gets his non-perishables. He loads it in different beer. But when he gets to our station wagon, and I knew him already, actually his wife used to babysit us. He's not saying anything. He places the food in there, but I noticed, and he was like a big man, good 6-something, big, but he's not saying anything, but he has a tear, like, physically on his face, but he doesn't say anything. He just puts the food in and he goes. And then from pretty much there, and actually even Uncle MJ was out there, it was like a big thing. He lived right around the corner. And we finally was on our way. And we traveled, lots of children, lots of ummis, abus. And we traveled to California, and we arrived there. And we arrived there pretty much, and we are very welcome, because when you get there, there's other muhajireens, but it's not a lot, but it's enough, and they're very, very welcome, very welcoming. But this would also be the introducing to the commune lifestyle. There was 5 families, 4 families, this house, that other, but this is new, and we're everyone's hugging and embracing each other. Real hugging and embracing each other. Strangers hugging, embracing. The parents, the crying. The muhajireens have arrived.
So
basically,
real quick,
go ahead.
Just to, like, so I can put it in a little perspective. So, and just so we can clarify this right off the top, and Mubarak, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we're talking about Islamic, when we're talking about hijra in the Islamic sense, we're usually talking about from leaving like a non-Muslim environment to like a Muslim environment. So essentially what you guys have done at this point is leave your own dwelling in New York State or New York City or wherever, and then move to another American state.
Correct.
And move in with a bunch of people just in another like city somewhere.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct. We actually go into the Inglewood, Watts, Compton areas.
They had you in the ghetto, huh? That's crazy. That's so crazy.
And it's wild.
Wait.
There are gangbangers everywhere. This is the first time we see Crips and Bloods. Everyone has a Jerry curl. They have in those movies where you see they have what they call them lowriders. Everyone's bouncing up and down.
Wow.
Wait a minute. Wait.
Hold on.
I already know we're thinking the same thing. Go ahead, Mubarak. I know we're thinking the same thing.
I'm thinking, okay, I thought that this hijra, the muhajirin, and these people were went to a land somewhere that was set up like a community and like homesteader type thing. This is what I always imagined, but I guess no one actually said that. I just thought that that's what it was. So y'all went to the city, to the hood. I mean, so the narrative of everyone pre-Jilani being in this deplorable situation, no community, no unity, no direction, no organization in the ghetto or whatever, has been debunked by previous guests and even more so by you. There was definitely direction and instruction and organization and everything going on. And you went from a pretty solid community and everything to make Hijra to, by anyone's standards, is one of the toughest places to just live. I mean, I would like to know if you know what the rationale or what the benefit to that was, or like, I am baffled. I never knew. I thought it was like that the Hijra was to the land. It was like wow.
At least I thought it was like to like a rural like township or something. They literally, like, nowadays you couldn't say they moved from like a Muslim neighborhood in New York City to like the equivalent of like downtown Chicago.
And so for the record, listen to and you understand, this is amazing. The narrative is that they were in the ghettos, and Jilani came and took them out of the ghettos. But actually, what actually happened is they were taken from a structured, nice running community or whatever to the ghetto. This literally is what it was. They went from, you know, a structured system, schooling, community, functioning to the ghetto. It's literally the opposite. I mean, Allahu musta'an. Allahu musta'an. I'm sorry. So absolutely. I mean, go ahead, continue. I know we keep jumping in, but this is
no problem. No problem at all. It's a pleasure for me to even share my story. Okay, so we're here. Like I said, very warm welcoming. We feel very welcome. Some people I am actually familiar with, their families, you know, they were from New York, and the other families, you know, I was not familiar with, but everything's going well. But it is only 24 hours in, and here we go with the indoctrination. And this is amongst the children. We're standing around. This is literally the next day. We're all standing around, and one of the boys, he was 12. He looks at us all and he says, "Which one of y'all been to the court of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam?" Me and my brother have no idea. Standing here, I'm 12, about around 12, and he's only 13. But these children are already there, and they're a hype. And this is a trio of brothers. So he goes, and so we look, and he's like, "What court?" He's at the court of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says it again. So he's like, "Oh." So he actually, this is our first indoctrination. He begins to explain the spiritual world to us. And he explains who took him there. Sheikh Jelani. So kind of like a little throne. Okay. And so I'm looking, and we say, so me and my brother standing there, and we're like, "Well, what did you see there?" He said, "Well, I saw the Nabi's wives." So I kind of like stare at him a little bit, because I've always kind of been a little bit suspicious, you know, kind of a suspicious person. I kind of corner eye him. And he looks at me again, and he said, so everyone's quiet because all the kids is just memorized, you know, these children are all surrounded. And I said, "Well, what do they look like?" And this is how he explained them. He said, "Well, I didn't see their faces. They were in full black, their hands were covered, and their feet were covered." So, this is what happened. So I said, "Well, how do you know it was them?" And he said, "My sheikh took me there. That's how I know."
And this was a 12-year-old boy or so?
This was 12 years.
Start early, bro. Start early. Ain't no way.
And this is where it starts getting interesting. And this is the beginning of all these predictions and jinns and the demon world. He goes straight in. He goes, "Well, I'm the youngest senior Talib. At this point, we don't know what Talibs even are. We don't even know what a Talib is. This is all new to us." And we go into, and he mentions the Hokas. We didn't know anything about Hokas at this time. So he goes in and he starts speaking about his parents. He said, Sheikh Jelani said that my parents would be martyred them. He actually began to describe his parents' station along with himself. He began to go into hokas. We had never heard of a hoka. And he says, and when I am in my hoka, Sheikh Jelani takes me, in the spiritual world, we didn't have this in our vocabulary whatsoever, to Lahut Lama Khan. And I always laugh because this is the first time I ever hear Lahut Lama Khan. I have never heard up to this point. And so much so, as he's telling the story, his actually comes out and she chimes in. And she helps him out with all these stories. And this pretty much would be the beginning of a very interesting ride. And predictions.
12-year-old boy.
He was 12.
Can we? I know. I don't want to. If you don't want to, we're not to reveal the guy's identity. But can we at least get context of what family this is from, if we know?
You wouldn't know this family, and the saddest part about it, actually, and how I remember pretty much everything, because I had friends who were on Hijra, and we would talk about the stories, and actually, we actually discussed also one of the early predictions. Throughout the years, I've talked, to many people who were there at the Hijra, and we were all children together, and one of the predictions were, listen carefully, that the seventh Sultan was nestled in his womb at that time.
Really?
Oh, wow.
Listen carefully. He was nestled in his womb at that time. That was told to the people. And I'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay.
So much so.
But real quick, at this time, who's Mubarak Jelani actually married to at this point?
Just his Pakistani wife. Just a Pakistani wife.
Oh wow. Not even one in charge now. Crazy.
It was just one wife at this time. It was just one side. Just one wife at the time.
Oh man.
So for a little clarity, so the seventh Sultan at that time was alleged to have been nestled into. So basically, so the mother of the seventh Sultan,
right,
should have been pregnant with the seventh Sultan. If we just make it plain. So therefore, that would eliminate anyone, mother, son, or any sort of combination running around today with these claims. None of them were born yet, nor nor even thought about. As my mother says, wasn't even a twinkle in their dad's eye. So I mean,
unless it's Shafat who actually said the whole concept is bullcrap.
He returned though for his spot on the throne. Come on, man.
But he must have passed this. You know what? The seventh Sultan thing is something that's transferable. So maybe he just did it when he did the turban. I don't want it. You got it now.
So there's a couple of things, and I don't know if are we actually really trying to make this show 30 minutes or 1 hour? What are we doing? Are we even pretending to do that? Let's okay.
I'm pretty sure we have an hour and a half, would be the shortest time.
Okay. So boss, am I free to ask some?
You are free. We're good for a good 2 hours or so, 2.5 hours maybe.
Okay. I really want to have just try to help myself and some others to understand something. So this Hijra, at this point in your story, in your account, I don't want anyone to think, story like we're just entertaining people. No, this is your account of your experiences in your life. Okay. Absolutely. So at this point, is there any understanding of the reason why the Hijra, what was the rationale behind leaving and going there?
Well, remember, this is still in the mind of a child, pretty much through the lens of a child. Mm-hmm. What was explained to us was being the Muhajirin and to be removing ourselves out of the inner city and to be building a new life.
Okay. But you moved to from one city to an inner city, and is it safe to say that the environment was worse that you moved to?
The ratio would be that there was I couldn't equate one to the other pretty much. The difference was it was a little bit more suburban. Had a little bit more suburban. It was like an inner city look, so much.
Right.
So I would say that. But other than, it was like you would see pretty much on the movies. Crips and the Bloods, the older movies, and the, pretty much, the low riders and things like that.
So,
but getting back to the, go ahead, please.
So I'm just trying to like wrap my head around, because like the rationale, like for your parents, I mean, okay, they are making this move, and I'm just trying to, because as you know, like I'm kind of at a point where I'm just kind of, a lot of the responsibility for what has happened, I'm kind of looking elsewhere at some people who may be more responsible than maybe just the one person that we like to pin it on. Even though there's plenty of blame to go around, but I'm trying to find the rationale from like our parents' perspective of why they would say, okay, this looks like a good thing to do. And I'm struggling to find it, but I'm just, for anyone that's wondered, okay, like why did they do it? I don't see it, and so I'm just looking for anything that might be there.
Here's some context, just when you step back and look at everything in hindsight of all the evidence that we have. So, when Mubarak Jilani came, and certain members decided, the big split of the Dar al-Islam, right? It wasn't really a split. Most people stayed in the Dar al-Islam, or most people did not follow Mubarak Jilani. And pretty much it wasn't a hijra to go. It was like an exodus of, we need to find someplace to go because we can't stay here, because the majority of the people that are staying, they don't want anything to do with this.
Right.
So they were literally like going to places trying to find support and other people to join Al-Fuqra. And if you look at the history, they went to California, then they left California, then they went to Michigan, went to South Carolina. They were going to all these places that the Dar al-Islam had connections to, and just basically like recruiting and trying to find a place for people to take them in, and just trying to set up shop. That's pretty much what happened. Just political moving, nothing had to do with like, oh, we're getting out of the inner city, or we're trying to get on some land or anything like that. It had to do with just like, we need to find some place to go and set up shop.
Okay.
Like, correct.
Understood.
Okay. So from there, and one of the, I think we stopped at the seventh Sultan.
Lahut Lamakan.
Right. We started.
Where the seventh Sultan was nestled in the womb of the
current
his
wife
mother at this point in time, and this was
so much so that one of the ladies actually was with child at the time, and she believed that it was a possibility that she was carrying it, and actually, like the seniors in our wombs, was because she would like do her mamala, and the baby would move a certain way, and she actually would have like repeated dreams, and at this time, dreams meant everything.
Wait. I'm sorry. I know we keep interrupting. So it's not just in the womb. People in the Jamaat actually thought that a regular member in TMOA could give birth to the seventh Sultan.
Well, yes, one of the Ummis. Yeah.
Oh wow! So
and she was supported by the other ladies. Like other ladies around. However. And we were excited, but it was not like she was having it. And it was also pretty much like, if she didn't give birth to the seventh Sultan, this child would probably be special, her son would be special, or, and it would still be pretty much like an auspicious birth.
Right.
So, there was no, it was nothing definite. It wasn't definite. So she goes into labor, and we like all excited. She goes into labor one day, girls in the Ummis. She goes into labor, and kind of like waiting for the word, to come back. And so like one of the elders came back, and she comes in. She's like, and she said, blank, her name. She gives birth to a baby girl. But we are, the memento is the same. We are still pretty much excited, because, it's still the ladies and the support system of the ladies and the girls and things of that nature. And we get to see her, But I remember the ladies putting their arms around her and pat her because her mood was kind of not, it was a little bit more sullen. And I said, it's okay. It's all right. It's okay. Because I think she thought she was going to be giving birth possibly. And she had all these dreams and people were supporting the dream, but her baby came out to be a beautiful, and we would carry her and stuff like that. And nothing changed from that. But that would be the early, when you kind of look back and be like the spiritual abuse.
Right.
Where so much so that, even the members without being brainwashed became brainwashed.
Yep.
Sad to say, because that's a form of spiritual abuse to even kind of like toss that out there like that.
Yep.
But pretty much from there, it gets lively, very lively. The daily life. And when you hear those stories about those hokers, every word of that is true.
So give us some examples of some things that people that don't have any experience with, or heard stories of, they'll give them a good conception of what actually used to be going on back then.
So many people have shared the same experience, so I don't even know where to start from there. And I even spoke to you about the predictions and even the young man speaking of predictions. I actually have talked to friends throughout the years, and we actually talked about it, the ones that were there. And sad to say, not only did that whole entire year and a little over a year that we were there, not one of them ever came to even the personal predictions. And sad to say, a lot of those families actually suffered misfortune. And actually some tragedies. And how I know these accounts are, through a young child's lens are correct, because I shared them with others. We remembered and we shared them, and we would talk about them, throughout the years as full grown adults.
So even the Lahut Lamakan boy, his are his parents still alive?
One is deceased and one is alive, but they are not in the community whatsoever.
Did the one that passed away, may Allah forgive him and grant him Jannah, did he die in jihad as to be a martyr as he was predicted?
Absolutely not. And I know exactly what he died of. If I actually say what he died of, many people would know exactly who I'm talking about. So I'm going to try to go ahead and cover their identity.
Right.
And,
but the false predictions, and we usually sometimes when we're chatting, they come up and people just randomly remember certain things that came up. But there's been literally every prediction that's ever been made by Mubarak Jelani and all the other leaders, none of them have come true. Not a single one. We were talking, one of our companions was talking to somebody, and they brought up the prediction of President Bush being the last president, right? And then they found a way to justify it. I was like, well, there might be another Bush that gets elected president, Bush the 20th.
It's the constant thing, man. I really I actually, well, not really, not anymore. I used to feel kind of sad for some of these people who believed in some of these predictions and based their lives on it. There's people who were outstanding at sports, but some older brothers would say, hey, we're not going to be playing no sports. They're not going to be no NBA or NFL. So you really just need to be worried. We're going to be in the war at that time. Yeah. So they pretty much was like, well, this is going to be a waste of time. Yeah. And it's just stuff like that. But it is it's unfortunate. I don't want to take over your
no problem at all. No problem at all. And yeah. So basically, like I said, it became lively, very quickly. And up to this point, this is still through, trying, track my child memory. Sheikh Jelani wasn't there initially, but he would join. He would come, like I would say, very soon after. Very soon
So
after.
where do you know, like even now, or did you know at that time, like where was he, or like when you guys did make this hijra, was he alongside of you guys struggling and sharing the same foods and staying in the same cramped quarters?
Yes.
Oh.
He lived amongst the people. He lived.
Nice.
Matter of fact, it was the entire year. And that if he did at any point left for whatever, his own personal affairs, he definitely came back. Pretty much the entire year. And people would come in drones from different states, come and visit, and they would leave and others would stay.
Okay.
All many different states, and they would leave.
And was it like at that point, was it the mentality that you guys were gonna like find a place to settle and stay in California?
They were speaking about land. Definitely, I remember that. We would speak about land.
So I would wonder why, like, they would strategically plan to settle in a land that Jelani predicted would be underwater by like the end of the century. Like that's one of his predictions, that California would be underwater, but you want to go, like, you make hijra to the place that's going to be underwater. That's just weird.
Correct.
Yeah. So growing up in California, is there any point, like looking back, that you, with your child mind, did you question things, or did you eventually just get wrapped up right into the indoctrination?
No.
Or was it both?
No.
Okay.
I always kind of been a person, kind of a little bit, like I said, a little bit suspicious. But it was nothing what I could verbally express. So like I said, I was not exposed to these things prior. And some of the children actually were. They were more indoctrinated already. So we have the hokas and they had the, knots, they would have the knots, but all of the knots was military. And the real live hokas, where you start on the floor and then now you're in standing position. The would have the kimars, and literally you can see the baby's head going bopping up and down because the is just out of control.
Oh God.
Those type of hokas, pretty much. But arriving there, like shortly after, Mubarak Jelani arrives there, we do have a slight problem. Like the people weren't really taken well, because actually some of them were afraid of us. And at this point, this is like all the children, ladies, girls. He says, I remember, try to best without misquoting him. He says to remove all of that black off of you, which was understandable because we couldn't even enter the supermarkets at this point without them screaming and hollering. Now, everyone didn't dress like that. And even the families who made hijra us, some of the ladies did, they were, all black gloves, however. And he said to remove that, which was understandable, like I said prior, but it was what he said after. He said to leave behind the ways of the deviants, the Salafis, behind you, as they were the deviants. And now that they were his talibs and talibas, fakirs and fakirs. And I hope I didn't misquote that. So the ladies all went home and started dishing all this black. Took it all off.
So before, so at this time, this is amazing. So at this time, like, the ladies were dressing like, how you would see a lot of in some of the the Salafi or communities, or even lots of places in America. Here in my city, just everywhere, where they wear the black, if not, or niqab, gloves. They don't have their feet out. All these things. So is this the way that the ladies were commonly dressing at that time?
Some did, some didn't. And they all from the same community. Basically all from the same community. So they pretty much ditched that and put on, more presentable colors. We also, some of the girls were wearing what we call now the amiras, like the younger girls. And he said that was not the proper way to wear the khimar, but we were using the word like khimar or headpiece. And he said, no, they cannot be sewn up the front. And that's when they introduced us to the word chada, and these things like the words, and that you placed it on your head and you more of like the Eastern Indian culture and to throw them over.
Right. Just to give a little perspective because I like looking at, it's interesting looking at where the members of the Jamaat, not looking at the organizations, but the members of the Jamaat from the Dar al-Islam days and comparing it to like what actually Al-Fuqra / MOA / TMOA is actually to this day, where, he took them from basically dressing like the wives of the prophet, the same prophet that this guy seen in a dream, right? Wearing black, covered and all that, to nowadays where they're actually told that they cannot dress like Muslims and not to wear overgarments, where they pretty much just dress like the modern day hijabis, where you just have a hijab on and maybe you just wear some regular American style clothes. That's like what they pretty much most of the Jamaat people dress like nowadays. Very interesting.
Absolutely. So pretty much we have, these hokas, everything, and I mean everything was a jinn. Everything. Who saw a jinn? And the ones who actually could see jinns were supposed to be on a certain spiritual realm. Everything was a jinn. Everything was exorcism. Everything was hoka. And everything was hawks. So much so. And you know how if you have one hawk in the sky, it just kind of pretty much soars. But if you have multiple hawks, they kind of form a circle. And the community actually thought, mind you, I don't remember Mubarak Jelani correcting them. They believed that these were his ancestors. And it was like, that was Sultan Bahu and Abdul Qadir Jilani. And the brothers will lose all spiritual and emotional control. Screaming, who? Now the neighborhood that we were in were Mexicans, Samoans, and Afro-Americans. The blacks were not having it. They would actually come outside and mock us. They would pretend they was having seizures on the ground, standing up, doing their heads. They would point to the sky. And even when it wasn't going on, like the sky was clear, if we just would come outside, because at this time we could go from house to house, but then we had like an apartment building, was kind of like a villa. So all the Muslims lived there, together. And even the back apartments, Muslims lived there. So they had like a courtyard. The brothers prayed outside and things of this nature. But if they saw hawks, women, children, the men would come out and they will put on a show. A show. And not a humble show, not a modest show, not the way of the Sufi, or self-proclaimed Sufis, however. And like I said, the neighbors weren't having it. Just the nature, of Afro-Americans, the blacks. I mean, they tore into us.
Yeah.
But other than that, we had lots of classes. We were taught the first to the sixth sultan. Fatima, and all of these were his relatives. I remember that. We were talking about the sultans of Hawk.
Wait a minute. Wait. So he or they taught y'all that they were all his relatives.
Right, because the first one, I believe, and I don't want to get this wrong, was Fatima. Right. I believe there was someone who I think was Basri. Sultan Bahu, Basri, so, Abdul Qadir Jilani, and then himself, the reviver of the deen.
It's this. Oh my gosh! It's just like dealing with the other brother, the Max Stuffins that sent us the message. It's really sad when the person that's teaching us this doesn't even know that they're not even all related. Like Hassan Basri is not Ahl Bayt. He's not related to Fatima. He's not related to Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani. He's not related to any of them. Sultan Bahu is not Ahl Bayt. So if he's claiming to be Ahl Bayt, then maybe he's related to, Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani. They have the same last name. Who knows if they're actually related? If he's claiming to be Ahl Bayt, then he's related to Fatima, but then he's not related to Sultan Bahu and Hassan Basri. It's just, oh gosh, this is why we have these conversations, because the more information that comes out here, the more plot holes just keep coming up, and it's like endless. It's almost
correct,
like the roads of New York, as Amr would say.
It's fifth generation, obviously, Jaffer. All right,
But
alphabet fifth generation. There, you have to go from.
But to be clear, Jilani actually himself taught the aqidah, the belief system of the seven sultans. Like, did you see him actually or hear him teaching
but
this?
he was there, and
Mhm.
they took instruction from him, and they shared it with us. And this was pretty much everyone.
Mhm.
So because we were learning about, along with our parents, what would it, pretty much what would it be like, as Fukra and joining, a new community. So the children, everyone, we kind of pretty much learned this together. It was
So
like nothing pretty much hidden or anything like that.
So one other question, and that is, I in the beginning you talked about how your parents had signed up for the jihad campaign.
Correct.
At this time, they're in California. Jilani was, for that year, he was living with, amongst you all, teaching the seven sultans, all this thing. Was the jihad campaign still something that that was being worked towards, developed? I mean, was that a thing, like recruiting for that, or had that kind of turned into something else?
I don't remember that. I don't really remember, because you remember, I was still very young, so I don't remember all of the politics of that time. But the jihad would change. I do know the jihad would change, and this would be actually going to the next chapter of this whole year. Okay.
Let's see what time is it?
Yep.
Okay. We can actually do a part 2 or 3 at some time, because at 9 o'clock, I'm definitely ready to wrap this up even before that. But I would go ahead.
Yeah.
And
wherever you feel like is a good stopping point, we should stop, because I think this next chapter is we definitely have to start fresh with some of the next stuff, because it's really it's intense. I mean, for me, especially for some of the subject matter that we had talked about in the past on the show and things, I think it will help put some things into perspective, especially from a lady's point of view. And I think we have been sorely lacking that on the show. And so I really appreciate that you coming to do this, because I think
it is absolutely my pleasure. And if it takes, to come on the second time or third time,
actually, I mean, you like I said, we can do as many shows as it takes to get everything out. As long as it's helping people, we can do 10 shows in a row. I promise you, it's no issue. One thing that I do want to make sure is that Amr, do we have any questions or comments that do you mind taking any questions, Sister Scheherazade, or is that okay? Or
that is fine.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, let's for everybody that's gonna post them in, try to keep them towards the subject matter that she talked about already.
Yeah.
That way we don't have any spoilers or bring up stuff that she's gonna talk about in the next episodes.
Yeah.
Inshallah.
And so I think right here is probably if you think so as well, but I think maybe this is a good stopping point, and then let's.
It's perfect. Actually, it's perfect. Perfect.
Yeah. So let's tie up any questions about what we have covered so far. Don't jump ahead.
Yeah.
But about what we have covered so far, if we have the questions in the Zoom or in the chat or from in the DMs, let's take care of those so that we kind of keep it, moving along instead of jumping ahead. Let's see.
While we get them, I got a question for you, Scheherazade. Looking back,
actually, it's pronounced Scheherazade.
Yeah,
it's Scheherazade.
Scheherazade.
Right. It is an old Persian Arabic name from the Persian Empire.
Storyteller?
It was a name of a princess. I mean, actually, it was an empress who became a queen.
Mashallah.
And it actually means noble or righteous lineage. That's what it actually means.
So Scheherazade.
It's Scheherazade.
Scheherazade. Okay.
Right.
So looking back on all the stuff, what would you say was like the first thing that should have been like, oh yeah, I need to get away from this? What would you feel like the first thing, the earliest sign?
Like I said, all of the that was presented to us, arriving Hijra. I'm kind of a person, even as a young person, I have to really understand it. So I didn't believe the fables right away. I simply did not believe these fables. It would have, I'm kind of person, something has to digest, pretty much digest it slowly. But they was just too outlandish for me. Even young. I mean, come on. All these jinns and demons, and they had the mayonnaise jars and the jelly jars, and they blowing into these vessels. And we were taught as children never to blow into a vessel. You don't blow into things. And they sprinkling on each other, and people are screaming. And I'm going, this just doesn't feel right. It did not resonate with me in the very beginning.
So wait, they were blowing into jars and stuff
Yeah, they would make like dua, Mubarak Jalani would give them duas, and the people would drink it for healing, and they would sprinkle it on each other for healing. Okay. Because come on, you come from what seemed to be stable, Islamically stable. And we were taught as children Tawheed, the Tawheed was taught to us as children. Right. And basically from here, it's all of this mystical stuff. Who's possessed? Who's this? Who's that? I mean, literally, mayonnaise jars and jelly jars sprinkling each other. The children would even, if they had a dispute with another child, mommy said that you and me and y'all possessed. And they were getting fights. They were actually getting fights. That was like a curse word. That was a curse word.
From your perspective, before you guys joined Al Fukra, like you said, everybody was getting possessed and everything was jinns. But did you notice anything let's just say an odd behavior by people, because we don't know whether they're possessed or they have mental issues or whatever. But did you notice any difference between in the Dar al-Islam, where was there the same amount of people being affected by things versus when you guys joined Al Fukra?
Absolutely not. But they taught us the basics, of the unseen world. We had to say the dua before you go into the bathroom. They taught us, you step with a certain foot first. Those things, and they would have it. Our parents would actually have the duas on the walls. We have cards everywhere around the house to remind us of what we were supposed to say. We didn't know about eating the sunnah with your 3 fingers and things of this nature. And that was, and we had that when I grew up as a little girl. My parents, and along with the other Muslim family, had vast libraries. We could read and pretty much get on whatever. Pretty much we didn't have to ask permission. We had vast libraries. We could read Quran. They encouraged us to read Quran. And my parents had again, a vast library, and that was encouraging our learning.
Right.
But when we made the hijrah, that dissipated pretty much. Matter of fact, I don't remember ever reading an hadith on hijrah. We were encouraged to read Quran. I didn't even see hadiths. But I also remember them saying, and I could get this wrong, and someone may correct me, that he even said that some of those, and I can't remember the word, I think he used the word, or the word was being used because I didn't hear him say it, that they were not authentic or daif or something like that. And that he would need to approve pretty much any of the hadiths the people were reading. However, matter of fact, I remember that we didn't take our hadiths with us because I think at that time with my parents, however, they had to understand even before you made hijrah that these were not the correct teachings.
And just to give a little context.
But we did take our Qurans. We did take the Qurans because my mother had many Qurans.
In one of his discourses, I don't know which one, but when she's talking about the daif or the weak hadiths, Mubarak Jalani actually says that the hadiths, or some of the hadiths in Sahih Bukhari, are weak and fabricated. like literally the book that scholars have said is like the most authentic, second to the Holy Quran. Mubarak Jelani is saying that they're actually not authentic hadiths in there.
Yeah, I mean
Okay.
there are some hadith in Sahih Bukhari that afterwards people have, some of the, not people but ulama and actually scholars and muhaddis of hadith have like assessed the grading of it, or when other hadith are compared to it, that may be more authentic than one that's in Sahih Bukhari. But as far as them being da'if or fabricated or anything like that, I don't know anyone who has any real understanding of the hadith sciences and is familiar with Sahih Bukhari that would say that about the book, except for someone who, was a deviant. Usually people who like the Shia. The Shiites are the ones who usually say that about Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, Sunan Abu Dawood, Tirmidhi, and all those books. So,
Okay. Right.
We have one question in the Zoom chat saying, "Were you close to Abu Muhammad and his family?"
Yes.
Okay. So yes, she was. Let's see. Do we have any other questions from the YouTube? Let's see. I don't see anything.
I would say one question that I have is that, was there anything, I mean, up to this point, and now looking back at it as you've grown up, but looking back even during this time, is there anything that now you look back at it and say, I mean, wow, how couldn't I have seen that? Or something that is like, now that at the time you really didn't find it to be that strange or out of the ordinary, or wasn't really a red flag or anything, but now you look back and say, wow, that was, something that I probably should have, or my parents or whoever probably should have, should a light bulb should have went off. Maybe like one of those things that like you take as normal, like just a normal thing.
Right.
But now you're like, wow, that definitely was not normal. I mean,
it would basically cover, much of what I actually already spoke of. And there would be more things a little bit down the line where actually, as because you remember, you as a child, not processing this when you're in your tweens, the adolescence, it's just processing. But even then, I was like, because it was a vast contrast to where I had already been raised in. I had a little foundation, like 12-year-olds, they kind of have a little foundation. And my education, as far as, my religious foundation, was very, very well grounded. Not just for my parents, my neighbors, everyone we called auntie and uncle. So it was very founded already. So it was really it was just like the hijr, muhajirin, things of that nature. But never did I was like, oh man, this is the most, like euphoric event. I never processed that.
What as a child, actually I'll ask the question in the chat first before I get to mine. So, do you know if they were involved in any of like the halala type marriages in California when you were there?
A bit too young at the time. To remember that.
So my question is,
but I was there when he got married. I was there when he got married to his first American wife. We were there. I was at the wedding.
And which wife was this?
Was this would be the first American wife? That would, we would be there. My family would be there.
This was before.
That would be yes. We was at the wedding. Right.
Nice. Okay. And what was your as a child, like, what was your impression? Because you're around Mubarak Jelani, you've seen him, you heard him talk, he was in your house. What was your impression of him just at that age? We're like, oh, this is a great man. He's holy, he's nice.
I never processed that, simply because I never really had that kind of reference to people in general. I'm not one to kind of idolize people. That would be even my nature more as a child. I was still that way. So it was never that. It was mostly all the adults and, children. And there were children who were that way, but I wasn't.
Right.
And he
Okay.
did make I remember I was walking, this is early part of him there, and he said, for some reason he was like, for the ladies, because I wasn't there, my and the elders were there, and they said, well, who, I guess he pointed like, who's that? And they said, she's, my mother's name, and that's her daughter. And he said, well, what's her name? And they said, oh, her name is Scheherazade. He said, Scheherazade, where did you get that name from? Like, we were not capable of having that name because that would be more of a rare name. And he actually had them say it again. And he said, well, who? And then he goes, well, who would name her that? And this is being told to me. And my mother says, well, her father named her that, Muslim, he looked through, and the pioneers, they read everything. They want to learn about everything, and so he decided, this was his firstborn Muslim daughter, and he would name her with the most exquisite name that he thought befitted her. But I remember that, like, where did she, like, who the, and I actually have had that experience with other foreign Muslims, mostly like Afghani. It was like, where'd you get that name from? I was like, oh, my Abu named me this. And it was like, they said, and they would act like they had ownership of it.
Yeah.
She was like, and they would go through the history.
Yeah.
This Queen Scheherazade, the Empress. I said, oh yeah. I was like, my family explained it to me.
They try to school you on it.
Yeah. So I have had that reaction pretty much with foreigners. So
it's funny because we had a video on our old channel that touched on some of the stuff that the racist stuff that Mubarak Jelani has openly said, and this is just another example of if anybody doesn't know, the Dar al-Islam started literally because of this issue, the racism that a lot of foreign Muslims have of African American Muslims. They think we're ignorant. They think we're slaves. They think we can't learn Islam. We're not true Muslims. So that's when they started the Dar al-Islam. And the whole thing behind the Dar al-Islam was like, kind of like for us by us. We're going to rule ourselves. We're going to teach ourselves. We know our communities, and we're going to do this, right? And then you have, Mubarak Jelani comes in from Pakistan, basically considers American Muslims as slaves. And then like he hears someone that has this, exquisite, exotic name. How could you possibly know what this name is? Who named her that? It just shows how much he looks down on the people.
Oh, right, correct.
I don't think we have any other questions. We have a question for R2F that's asking about an update on getting our original channel back. So we don't know. We're probably not going to get our original channel back, but we did beat all the copyright claims. Yeah. We won all those disputes, so that's a good thing. But the problem with Google or YouTube or whatever is everything's automated. So once we hit our third strike, I believe our page automatically got deleted, and it's probably too late to recover it. Allah knows best. We have service requests into the people that handle that. We'll see what happens. It doesn't really matter. We got a new channel up already. We just lost some of our old content. We got our exactly. We got our subscribers back up, and we're still working. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
Last question. Someone asked, what year was it? During this, your time in California.
Question again? Like what year?
Yeah.
Time frame of the California.
Oh, the time frame. 1982 through 1983.
Okay. So the 80s. Okay.
So I think that's it for tonight's episode. We don't want to jump into anything else that's
okay.
that get us too much. So we're gonna definitely have a part 2 and probably a part 3 with the Empress of R2F. And Mubarak or Amr, got anything to add before I close this out?
I think we got it, brother.
Okay.
And it was absolutely a pleasure to be amongst my R2F brothers.
I mean, absolutely. I'm looking forward to the next episode. The next probably going to be the next 2 actually. I would be surprised if we get to it in just 2, but we won't. We'll try not to waste too much of your time. But we appreciate
Inshallah.
it. This is
Inshallah.
Okay.
So Mubarak opened us up and talked about how, you know, we deviate from the religion when we start just adding stuff to it or taking stuff away to it from it that Allah doesn't specifically command us to do. And I want to talk about, because we get a lot of criticism, especially R2F, the people that worked at R2F, the people that are coming on the shows like Scheherazade, and they're giving accounts of what they've experienced. And a lot of the same rhetoric is being said about, like, just be quiet. Even people that support us take this position of, you know, just be quiet. And as Muslims, you know, everything we're supposed to do is supposed to be supported by the Quran and the Hadith. So if someone's telling us to do something, then we go back to the Quran and the Sunnah to see what is the proper way to handle things. And so Islamically, we can go to the 34th hadith, and the 40 hadiths of Nawawi, the actual real 40 hadith. And Prophet Muhammad says, he says, whosoever of you sees an evil, let him change it with his hand. And if he is not able to do so, then let him change it with his tongue. And if he is not able to do so, then with his heart. And that is the weakest of faith. And this is in Sahih Muslim. So I'm pretty sure most everybody listening to the show has heard this hadith before. And most times we kind of stop at the hadith and not actually read the explanations or get into the wording and see what are the real implications of what these words mean. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of it as fast as I can, not get too deep, but just so we kind of understand what we're being commanded by Rasul Sallallahu to do and to not to do. So he begins by saying, whosoever. Now, when he says whosoever, he's referring to each and every Muslim. Each and every Muslim. That means anyone who can distinguish right from wrong, right? So we're not talking about little kids. We're not talking about people that may not be able to think straight. We're talking about people, anybody can distinguish right from wrong. So if you consider yourself somebody that can distinguish right from wrong, then you are held accountable towards this hadith. So we have no excuse, right? This is from the Quran, where Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 44, right? He says, and just to sidetrack, one of the things that people say all the time, and we get this a lot with people that actually are on the fence or they're TMOA enablers or cult enablers, where they actually agree with everything that we're saying in R2F, but then they take this like standoffish approach where they're like, well, I need to work on myself. I can't say anything now. I got to worry about my own issues, right? And this kind of is supported by the ayah in the Quran where Allah says, do you enjoin righteousness upon mankind while you yourselves forget to practice it? But people misunderstand this. This does not mean that if you're engaged in something wrong, that you cannot speak out against other wrongs, right? It's mutually exclusive. So as Muslims, we have 4 independent obligations. The first one is that we must order ourselves to do good. The second one is we must prevent ourselves from doing evil. The third one is that we must command others to do good. And the fourth one is that we must restrain or prevent others from doing evil. Each one are their own independent obligation upon us. So the people that take the position that, you know, I'm doing wrong, this is one thing that you're in the wrong for doing. Now, if you then use that as an excuse not to speak out against the wrong or prevent the wrong, you have just multiplied your sin by violating 2 other conditions or commands that are upon you. So just to get a little back into the hadith, when Rasul says, whoever of you sees an evil, let him change it with his hand. This is directly referring to the people that are in charge, the rulers. For the TMOA perspective, this is talking to the Shura Council, the leaders, the people that have influence. It is upon you to stop the wrong because you have the power to do so. But most of us, especially us in R2F, the people that are coming on the show, we have no power inside of TMOA, right? We have no power. We cannot change it. So remember the words. It says, if you are not able to do so, that means we cannot revert to just speaking about the evil if we can change it. But since we can't, we're able to go to the second level, the lesser level, which is to speak out against it, right? So we get to speak out against it. And just to kind of wrap this up, the third one says, again, if we aren't able to speak out against it, which most everybody's able to speak out against it, is that you have to hate it in your heart, right? And this is the one that everybody kind of reverts to just to avoid trouble, right? They don't want to get any negative backlash. They don't want people speaking about them. They don't want any negative repercussions, which is a legit concern, which, you know, a longer discussion, we can get into the criteria of when you can and cannot speak out against things. But Rasul is telling us that just hating it in your heart is the weakest part of faith. And this is the part I really want to focus in on, and I'll end with this. And I just want to use, actually, I'm not going to do this. Sorry, I'm going to go on a little tangent. So the first part is that for all those people that are going into the position of, I'm just going to hate this stuff in my heart and not say anything, this comes with conditions. And I'll just read the exact wording from the explanation of the hadith. It says that when someone really hates something in their heart, his behavior becomes affected. He will not be willing to sit in the presence of that evil. Let me say it again. He says, when someone truly hates something in his heart, he will not be willing to sit in the presence of that evil. This is referring to all you people in TMOA or associate with TMOA who just keep interacting, sitting around while all this shirk, all these transgressions, all this deviancy is just occurring and you're not saying anything. And if you can sit there and tolerate it, that means you actually don't hate it in your heart. And this is supported by in the Holy Quran, where Allah says, and it has already been revealed to you in the book, that when you hear the verses of Allah being denied and mocked, then sit not with them until they engage in a talk other than that. Right? It's a clear warning that Allah is telling us to move away from the evil. Right? And just one last thing I want to touch on, because this actually relates to speaking out against evil. And I'll kind of just skip to the end of it, but we have criteria for, you know, how we're supposed to speak out against evil, right? And a lot of people criticize us, especially me personally. I get a lot of criticism for being too harsh, for, you know, just being too direct, too straightforward, or pretty much too hard on these people, right? But there's a point as Muslims, when we're giving dawah and when we're speaking out against evil, there is a point that we actually do become harsh. So there's people that are not willing to listen. And all they do is attack and insult, right? These type of people are actually exempted from the soft approach. They actually put themselves in a position where we actually have to give them a harsh approach. We have to give them toughness. And again, this is supported by the Quran in Surah Tawbah, ayat 73, where Allah says, "O Prophet, strive hard against the disbelievers and the hypocrites and be harsh against them." So I just wanted to close us out with that so that people that are tempted to criticize what R2F is doing, criticize the people that are actually working and speaking out against falsehood and against evils, that to consider the advice, not only the advice, consider the commands of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and Rasul ﷺ. So with that, join us next week and we will continue with our show. Thank you everybody for joining us. And if there's any questions, hit us up on WhatsApp or send us an email. As-salatu was-salamu ala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asr. Innal insana lafi khasr. إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Wa alaikum salam.